One woman's fight to stop mankind's cruelty becomes a mission to save a species from destruction. Amidst the search for answers grows a battle for justice. Brian Brown and Sigourney Weaver star in the true adventures of Dian Fossey. The first showing on network television, Gorillas in the Mist, tomorrow, 9:30 on 1.
Why is it you never see moths in the daytime?
Life's great mysteries solved with one Jasper carrot in 20 minutes.
Now on BBC One, the news with Michael Burke. The time, 8:45.
The UN Secretary-General has warned the Serbs that pressure's growing for military intervention in Bosnia. He's going to Sarajevo, saying the next few days could be decisive. And the parents of the murdered teenager have appealed for help to find her killer. Good evening. The United Nations Secretary-General, Dr. Boutros Ghali, has warned that the pressure on the international community to intervene militarily in Bosnia was enormous and growing. The next few days, he said, could be decisive. The Secretary-General is in Geneva talking to leaders of the warring factions of what was Yugoslavia and preparing to visit the besieged Bosnian capital Sarajevo on Thursday.
The UN Secretary-General warned there was enormous pressure for military intervention in Bosnia from Western governments and from the media. He's said to have told President Ćosić of the Serb-dominated federal government that the next few days could be decisive. This was one of a series of meetings. The opposing political leaders did not meet face-to-face. Both the Serb and Croatian camps predicted the war could escalate into an international conflict if Islamic nations come to the aid of the Bosnian fighters. The State Department has warned the United States will use military force if the Serbs attempt to win conflict to the province of Kosovo.
I can say we're deeply concerned about the situation in Kosovo. We have discussed this with other governments, and our concerns are widely shared in the international community. We're watching and will continue to watch Serb actions in Kosovo carefully. There should be no doubt that the United States would take very seriously destabilizing acts by Serbia in Kosovo.
The American Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger has said he hopes the UN Security Council will pass a resolution by the end of the week to allow military enforcement of a no-fly zone over Bosnia. Britain remains cautious on this. John Major has stressed his concern for the safety of peacekeeping troops on the ground. In an apparent attempt to capitalise on this and avert foreign intervention, the leader of the Bosnian Serbs has written to Mr Major offering to allow UN observers on all Serb flights.
I think this new idea will enable the entire international community to have monitors reports day by day whether Serbs are violating this resolution or not, and then there would be no excuse for interference and involvement in this civil war in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Reports of a build-up of Bosnian Muslim forces on Mount Igman overlooking Sarajevo have prompted worries of a new offensive. International negotiators believe the Bosnian troops, impatient with the peace process, may try to regain lost territory by force.
The first heavy snow of the winter has fallen in Sarajevo, making conditions even worse for the inhabitants, who are living in sub-zero temperatures without electricity, gas or running water. Already the city's old people are dying from the cold.
The first snow of the winter came overnight to Sarajevo, the beginning perhaps of harder times than ever here. Since fuel is short, the water pumping stations aren't working, so people have to endure the discomfort of getting water where they can, regardless of the risk to health. But there are worse places, even in Sarajevo. As you can perhaps hear, we're right on the front line. There's shooting and mortaring all day and all night here. And right beside the front line, there's this old people's home. There's no protection here either against the bullets or against the cold. It used to be rather luxurious. Now a lot of it has been closed down because of war damage. There's a hard job just keeping one room on each floor heated. Snipers in the building behind make it dangerous even to get fuel. In the past few months, several of the staff and patients have been killed or wounded. Since it lies beside the Serbian lines, Serbian soldiers use its corridors as a shortcut to their positions. Watch out for snipers, he says. But the real enemy is the cold. 8 of the old people here have died in the past 4 days from hypothermia. This elderly woman would, the nurses said, be dead by tonight. Others huddle under their skimpy blankets, trying to keep warm. It's clean and well looked after, but there aren't enough blankets and there aren't enough stoves, so the wards are unheated. And there's nothing to stop the cold getting in. The snipers have seen to that. There used to be 100 staff here. Now there are only 6 to look after 120 old people. They've stayed from a sense of duty. If you could ask the outside world for help, I said, what would you want? Heating, clean sheets, and more nurses, they said. It's a dreadful way to end a long life. This woman is dying, and perhaps the last sound she hears is a sniper's rifle. John Simpson, BBC News, Sarajevo.
Here, the parents of a murdered 14-year-old Norfolk girl have made an emotional appeal for anyone with information to come forward. Joanna Young's body was found on Saturday night, just a mile from her home near Dereham. She died from drowning and severe head injuries.
Joanna Young's half-naked body was found on Boxing Day next to a water-filled pit. Today, the painstaking search for clues continued. The jeans she was wearing still haven't been found. Her parents appealed for more information about Joanna's last movements.
We had no arguments in the family. We just thought she was going out to meet friends. And that was that, really.
And there was a warning for the parents of other children.
For God's sake, make sure you know where they're going.
Yes.
Because I wish the hell I'd done that.
One lead, a possible sighting of Joanna at a Norwich kebab house, has now been discounted.
There are many leads, obviously. In this type of inquiry, the public respond to our appeals. All the information that they give us is followed up. And because of that, of course, yes, there are many lines of inquiry which we have to look at.
A post-mortem revealed Joanna died from drowning and head injuries. But the police admit so far a motive for the attack is unclear.
An aid convoy carrying food and medicines has been prevented from reaching the 400 Palestinian deportees stranded in no man's land between Israel and Lebanon. The convoy, organised by Arab-Israeli leaders, was turned back by Israeli border police.
Attempts continue to persuade the Israelis to allow supplies into the Palestinians' camp. A delegation of Israeli Arab leaders got as far as the southern edge of Israel's self-declared security zone today, but to no one's great surprise, the guards would not let them go any further. The Arabs reinforced their point with some public prayers, but no one is getting any closer to changing the situation on the ground. In the camp, the expelled Palestinians are holding a one-day fast to conserve food. Some supplies are being smuggled to them by supporters in Lebanon, but conditions are still bad. There are persistent reports in Israel that at least 6 of the deportees were rounded up by mistake. It's likely that special tribunals will begin hearing appeals soon, and some men may then be allowed home. But most will not, and the Lebanese have matched Israel's tough stance by saying that the UN envoy James Jonah will not be allowed to pass through their territory as planned and visit the camp tomorrow. Mr. Jonah, who's been meeting Palestinians in East Jerusalem, manages to stay remarkably cheerful, at least in public. Yesterday he heard Israel refuse to take the deportees back, and today he was pressed from the other side.
Israel is responsible. It cannot force a status quo on the Lebanese or on any other country. It cannot continue to impose deportation on other countries.
The Israelis have chosen this moment to ask moderate Palestinians in for talks about the future of the peace process. But the mood on the streets is not conducive to such discussions. The deportations are the issue of the moment, and all other questions have been pushed aside. Justin Webb, BBC News, Jerusalem.
The Americans are reported to be sending an aircraft carrier back to the Gulf to enforce the 2 no-fly zones in northern and southern Iraq. The Kitty Hawk left its station off the coast of Somalia this morning, following the shooting down of an Iraqi warplane by an American F-16 jet fighter. The 2 main warlords in the Somali capital, Mogadishu, have held a mass demonstration for peace in the centre of the city. 10,000 people attended the rally, celebrating what they hope will be the end of a struggle for power, which has been a major factor in the famine in the country.
It's a long time since Somalia has had any reason to bring out the band, but today the people of Mogadishu poured onto the streets under the banner of unity. in the shadow of the bombed remains of the country's parliament, the supporters of both sides came together to celebrate the end of the Green Line that has divided their city for so long. With this handshake, Farah Aidid and Ali Mahdi, Mogadishu's two warlords, announced an end to their feud, though the true test will lie in their deeds, not in their words.
We are having the flag of peace. We are demonstrating today, all the world and all Somali people, our unity, peace and, reconciliation.
But elsewhere on the streets, life is not so peaceful. One Somali was shot dead today by Marines after attacking a television crew. The soldiers aren't taking any chances. The Marines have not had a single fatality so far in Somalia, and they intend to keep it that way. Tom Carver, BBC News, Mogadishu.
Here, the government has changed its housing policy to encourage more investment in private rented homes. It's been attacked by Labour, who say the government's policy on home ownership has been pulled apart by growing unemployment.
From the moment when Mrs Thatcher handed over the deeds to the couple who became the first to buy their council house in 1980, her decade in power was marked by a massive increase in home ownership. But from its peak in 1988, the housing market has been notable for mortgage arrears, housing repossessions and negative equity. This has brought a highly significant change in government policy under John Major. Now the emphasis is on boosting the private rented sector. Ministers have been looking at giving incentives through tax breaks, cash grants or loans at preferential rates.
80% of people still want to be homeowners. So that ambition, I think, is still there, and obviously we must have policies that cater for that. But there is a significant minority who don't want to or can't afford to buy, and a responsible government interested in good housing policies must make sure that there is a choice available to them of good quality accommodation, and that's what we propose to do.
But while the construction industry will welcome anything that looks like help, the government's difficult task is to persuade the financial institutions there's more money to be made in renting out property than in other investments. And it seems that detailed agreement on these proposals is still some way off.
John Sopel reporting. More than 40 fishing boats have sailed into Lossiemouth Harbour in northern Scotland in a protest against the government's planned restrictions on catches. The Sea Conservation Bill would impose limits on the number of days a vessel can spend at sea.
The first of the boats moved into Lossiemouth Harbour this morning, the start of a two-day protest which brought the local fleet back to its home port for the first time in over 20 years. More than 30 vessels, which normally operate out of Aberdeen and Peterhead, are now berthed in the harbour, many displaying the anger felt by crews towards the government and the fisheries ministers who back a new bill limiting the number of days British boats can put to sea next year.
Sea Conservation Bill is going to tie our boats to the wall for probably half the year, while the member states of the Common Fisheries Policy are going to be allowed to fish free and daily. That can't be right.
Feelings against foreign boats are running high and have already led to the brief blockade of one Highland port used by the French. Scottish skippers who've been given larger EC fish quotas next year say the tie-up scheme may save stocks from British fishermen, but not from foreign competitors who face no restrictions on their time at sea. The Lossiemouth protesters say the only way to conserve stocks is for a properly funded decommissioning scheme to take boats out of the industry.
Stores throughout the country have reported the best start to the winter sales for years. Town centres were choked with traffic and there were motorway jams on the approaches to out-of-town shopping centres.
By mid-morning, the crush was well underway. Shoppers in Oxford Street, while still looking for value in a recession, were clearly willing to spend on bargains. Items for the home and clothing selling strongly.
It's certainly busier so far, up to this period of time, than any other day we've ever had. So we're looking for records today.
So, is confidence returning to the high street?
Very slightly, but I think it's a long way to go yet.
It's going to be one of those years. They're going to spend and stop indoors for the next month or so.
And this has been repeated across the country throughout the day. The AA has reported that town centres have been choked with traffic and car parks have been overflowing from Glasgow to Southampton. In Manchester, where pre-Christmas sales were slow, stores expect today's takings to be up 30% on last year.
Now with news of today's sport, David Davis.
Norwich City will enter 1993 at the top of the Premier League, but they could only draw 0-0 at Leeds today, and they missed a penalty. Manchester United's Eric Cantona, a recent purchase from Leeds, was amongst his new club's scorers in the biggest win of the day against Coventry. Chris Kiwomya got the Ipswich winner after Blackburn had taken the lead at Portman Road. Andy Sinton scored a hat-trick for Queen's Park Rangers as they beat Everton in a remarkable match at Loftus Road. Neville Southall, Everton's goalkeeper, was sent off for deliberate handball. Later his teammate, Paul Rideout, was dismissed for violent conduct. And those results mean Norwich maintain a 3-point lead, but Manchester United have now moved above Blackburn into second place. Ipswich are fourth. Aston Villa are playing Arsenal tonight. Latest score there, Villa lead 1-0. 2 goals from Oxford's Jim McGilton helped to inflict a rare defeat on Newcastle in Division 1, but their nearest rivals Tranmere also lost 3-1 at Barnsley. So Newcastle stay 12 points in front. West Ham drew, Millwall beat Leicester, Portsmouth won 4-2 at Derby. Well, England's cricketers have left for their 3-month tour of India and Sri Lanka. Their busy tour includes 7 one-day internationals and 4 tests. Their opening match is only 5 days away, but the first test against India doesn't start until the end of the month. Racing's champion national hunt trainer, Martin Pipe, has had an outstanding day at Chepstow. His horses won 5 of 7 races, and in the Coral Welsh National, his stable filled the first 4 places.
For free, the leader, but by not
Martin Pipe's prolific stable already had 2 winners in the bag when his 4 entries set off in the Welsh National in company with some of the country's best steeplechasers. From early on, Pipe's 2 main hopes, Run for Free and Minahoma, set the pace, and they were still pushing on well into the second circuit when Run for Free almost ruined what was to be a remarkable sequence.
Oh, he's nearly gone.
But jockey Mark Perrett managed to cling on and extraordinarily had re-established Run for Free's advantage by the time they cleared the last. Strung out behind him, almost in single file, were his 3 Pipe stablemates, Riverside Boy, Minahoma and Bonanza Boy. There might have been a 5th too. Chatham, a likely favourite, had been withdrawn just before the start. Later, 2 more Pipe horses returned to the winners' enclosure, 5 winners at combined odds of 602 to 1.
Long odds. From David and me, good night.
Hello, now the regional news, and the police are tonight looking for 2 men they fear may strike again after separate attacks in the region. In the most recent in Coventry, a young woman managed to escape, but in Shropshire a 67-year-old was raped. It was the second time that night the man had struck.
The attack happened only a few minutes after the woman had left the parish church of St Lawrence, where she'd been attending a midnight mass to celebrate Christmas. The large congregation had left by 1:30, and the woman wasn't far from her home when she was attacked and pulled into the grounds of Dinham House. The police believe the same man had attacked a younger woman just 3/4 of an hour earlier, but she managed to escape when a passing car drew up nearby. The rapist is described as white, in his mid-30s, 5 feet 8 inches tall, with short receding hair. He was wearing a chunky leather bomber-style jacket and a dark scarf. The police are appealing for anyone who thinks they can help to contact them.
Meanwhile, in Coventry, a teenager fought off a man who tried to rape her at knife point. Tracy Atkins, who's 17, was crossing this park on Boxing Day when the attack happened. But the man didn't reckon with her karate training, and she managed to escape with a wound to her hand. Today, Tracy helped the police put together a photo fit of the man they say must be caught before he strikes again. The region's shopping centres were packed today as the seasonal sales began. Shoppers didn't just queue for bargains. At Rackham's in Birmingham, they even had to queue to use the escalators. Many stores reported a busy day, with sales up by as much as 15% on last year. Finally, a look at tonight's football, which is in the Premier League, where Aston Villa are leading Arsenal by a 1-0. The scorer Dean Saunders from the penalty spot on half-time. That is a latest score. That's it from me. Have a very good evening. The weather is next, today with Bernard Davey.
Hello, it's not only the British Isles, but the whole of Europe that's likely to have a fairly widespread and at times severe frost tonight, so plenty of scraping of ice off cars tonight and at first tomorrow. Temperatures over the British Isles may well fall as low as -6 or 7, a little bit lower in 1 or 2 places. The only places likely to escape are around some of these coastal fringes where you've got an onshore breeze and up to the northwest where there's more in the way of cloud. And despite all the cloud over parts of Scotland, that won't stop you from having a frost nor having some freezing fog patches, and those freezing fog patches, some of them dense, will extend as far south as the Midlands. There's tomorrow's weather chart. This area of high pressure still causing a little bit of interference on television sets, but things should improve over the next few days as the high pressure starts to move away. These weather fronts moving erratically across the British Isles, tending to turn the weather a little bit more changeable. Now tomorrow we start off very cold and frosty with freezing fog patches. Most of them will clear, but here and there 1 or 2 of them will linger on right through the whole of the day. Up to the north and west, some thicker cloud, perhaps bringing the odd spot of drizzle into the Western Isles. Another cold day where temperatures sit around freezing. That's where you'll have the fog. Elsewhere around about 2 to 5, but some parts of the south and southwest and up to the northwest, here they could be as high as 6 or 7. Now moving on to Wednesday, still a lot of frosty weather and some fog to be had over much of England, some sunshine too, thicker cloud and some rain spilling across Scotland and Northern Ireland and heading down to Wales. Then as we move into New Year's Eve, the first band of cloud with its rain, most of it will have died out by now, will move into East Anglia in the southeast. A brighter slot behind that with some sunshine, and then another band of rain, heavy at times, moving into Scotland and Northern Ireland, to be followed by some showers and turning out to be quite windy up to the northwest, perhaps touching on gale force. But the temperatures in most places will be picking up. And then on New Year's Day, the south still mostly dry with some sunshine, to the north a good deal of cloud, some rain and some strong winds. That's it. Good night.
June, and on the eve of President Yeltsin's triumphant return to his country, he and President Bush went for a cruise on the presidential launch. He was a happy man. He got what he came for, a $10 billion loan and all the loose change in President Bush's trouser pockets. Yes, join Elle Macpherson and me for a last look back at 1992, this New Year's Eve at 10:20 on BBC One.
For the same price as a day's BBC, you can buy 1/1,000,000th of a Ferrari. The BBC, the best value television and radio there is.
While he may have one foot in the grave, Richard Wilson still has a score to settle with neighbour Angus Deaton after the Great Nome Massacre. That's in 50 minutes here on BBC One. Meanwhile, I think I'll just sit back and let you introduce the next programme.